Well, welcome to the 700 Club. Tributes to my father's legacy have been pouring in since his passing last Thursday. Today, presidential candidate Mike Pence shares his thoughts on my father's impact on America and the world.
In an exclusive interview with CBN News, the former vice president said the foundation on which to build a better future for America was, quote, in large measure for the last 50 years poured by Pat Robertson. CBN's chief political analyst David Brody caught up with Pence in New Hampshire.
Hi, folks. As Mike Pence begins his run for the presidency at traditional stops like Marianne's Diner in Derry, New Hampshire, he took time to sit down with CBN News and talk about something near and dear to his heart, the legacy of Pat Robertson.
Pat Robertson was a man whose faith and his commitment to American ideals will impact generations of Americans. And his testimony for Christ and sharing the gospel of Jesus Christ, not just around America, but around the world, has literally changed lives.
Pence reveals the impact Pat made on his life.
I felt drawn to Christian broadcasting because I'd made a decision as a college student to accept Jesus Christ as my personal Lord and Savior. And I got a copy of Shout It from the Rooftops. And I couldn't put it down, David.
And that book and Pat's obedience to Christ led to much fruit.
I know if Pat were still with us, he would give God the glory. But the debt that we owe to him as believers and as Americans, I think has to be paid with honor and remembering all that he did at CBN and far beyond that to impact the advance and the vitality of conservative traditional values in America.
Those conservative traditional values and the Republican Party, he in essence kind of joined them at the hip. I mean, he was a trailblazer in this area.
It's hard for me to imagine that the entire generation of Christian leaders, many of whom I've come to know personally, were not deeply impacted by his trailblazing boldness to step out as a believer and speak openly about his commitment to Christ and his commitment to traditional values.
Talk to me a little bit about the culture today. I mean, you know, Pat was so at the front lines of the culture wars of the 70s and 80s, and he brought it into the forefront in the 90s with the Christian Coalition. But here we are today in a world that has gone haywire.
You know, sometimes it's darkest just before the dawn. And I sense among the American people a great anxiety and a great concern about where the country is. But I'm confident. I'm confident that God is not done with America yet. And the future that we chart, the foundation on which we build, I believe in large measure, in the last 50 years was poured by Pat Robertson.
David Brody, CBN News, on the road with Mike Pence in New Hampshire.
Well, in other news from politics, even though he's facing federal charges, Donald Trump says he'll never leave the 2024 campaign for president. John Jessup has more on that story from our CBN News Bureau in Washington. John?
Thanks, Gordon. Preparations are underway for the former president to face a federal judge in Miami tomorrow, where he will enter a plea on dozens of felony charges accusing him of illegally handling classified information. Many Republican leaders are rallying around President Trump, calling the charges political. CBN's Dale Hurd has the story.
Security has been ramped up near the federal courthouse in Miami, where former President Donald Trump is set to face 37 charges he mishandled classified records and obstructed government efforts to get them back.
Trump is the first current or former president to face federal criminal charges, and to do so while campaigning for another term.
You get indicted over nothing. You get indicted over the Presidential Records Act, which they don't even admit. They call it the Espionage Act.
Some of Trump's main rivals for the GOP presidential nomination joined him in criticizing the indictment.
Attorney General Merrick Garland, stop hiding behind the special counsel and stand before the American people and explain why this indictment went forward.
Our founding fathers would have absolutely predicted the weaponization that we've seen with these agencies, particularly Justice and FBI.
while former Arkansas Governor Asa Hutchinson and former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie are openly criticizing Trump's behavior regarding the documents. Legal expert Alan Dershowitz calls it an effort to get Trump, but cautions
this is a much stronger indictment than the Bragg indictment, but it's the product of targeting. And the question is, can you prosecute somebody when you targeted that person?
William Barr, who served as Attorney General under Trump, says the indictment is fair.
If even half of it is true, then he's toast. It's a very detailed indictment, and it's very, very damning.
A CBS News poll found that 3 out of 4 likely GOP primary voters believe the indictment is politically motivated, and 61% say it won't change their view of Trump.
Trump says he'll never leave the presidential race. A former federal prosecutor said it's possible Trump could be jailed if convicted on any of the charges. Dale Hurd, CBN News.
All right, thank you, Dale. Well, turning now to the challenges confronting the largest Protestant denomination in America. As the Southern Baptist Convention begins its annual meeting in New Orleans today, the denomination is dealing with a historic drop in membership and a heated debate over women pastors. Charlene Aaron has the story.
The nation's largest Protestant denomination has seen a decline in membership for years and a drop in the overall number of congregations. This comes as debate about women pastors in the Southern Baptist Convention reaches a boiling point. Former Saddleback Church pastor Rick Warren recently issued a tough challenge to the denomination, calling it out for what he calls hypocrisy when it comes to the role of women in the church. Earlier this year, the SBC's executive committee ousted 5 churches, including Saddleback, for having women pastors. Saddleback is challenging that, with Warren expected to make a formal appeal at the SBC's annual meeting in New Orleans. That controversy, plus the membership decline, are pressing on Southern Baptists right now.
I've been talking about this for years. We have to expect it.
Statistics from 2022 show the number of members in Southern Baptist churches down around 13 million, down by more than 450,000 from 2021, the largest single drop in more than 100 years. Dr. Albert Mohler, president of the Southern Baptist Theological Seminary, spoke with CBN News about the shrinking numbers.
There was a time when the Southern Baptist Convention was riding the crest of a largely churched and Christianized culture in which people gain social capital by joining our churches. Well, guess what? They cash out social capital by joining our churches now.
Mohler puts part of the blame on the pandemic.
Part of this, quite frankly, also is the disequilibrium that came with COVID. But there's no doubt that you really found out who was with you on the other side of COVID and who's going to show up to church.
Warren challenges that assessment.
17 years of decline year after year after year is not a glitch. And the loss of 500,000 members in a single year cannot be ignored.
Some argue the decline is driven by recent revelations about the failure of leaders to handle sexual abuse cases. In 2022, an investigation of the executive committee showed a pattern of resistance to abuse claims. Charlene Aaron, CBN News.
All right, thank you, Charlene. Gordon, back to you.
I come from a very long line of Virginia Baptists going back 2 centuries. And in the early days of the Baptists in Virginia, you didn't gain any social capital by going to that church. You lost a ton of it. The way to get advanced in the Commonwealth of Virginia, the colony of Virginia in that period of time, was to join the Church of England, to become an Anglican. That was the path forward for them to turn against that and be Baptists on the basis of their sincere belief that you have to make an informed decision. That's essential to conversion. That's why we call them Baptists. You get adult baptism. They went to jail for that. And we need that kind of spirit again to say, we're not here for a social club. We're not here to join to get social capital. We're here to serve a living Savior and serve him to the best of our ability and under the dictates of our conscience. We need that. That's the basis of all revival, and we need it desperately in America today.